10 updates that are reshaping how we treat sepsis in 2025. So let's jump right in at the beginning, identifying the patient. Because the best tools for the job might not be what you think.
It's actually pretty remarkable. The traditional old-school screening tools are still the most practical for catching sepsis early at the bedside.
We're talking about things like SIRS, NuWs, and MuWs, right?
Exactly. The data shows these simpler scoring systems actually outperform a lot of the complex, machine learning models in the real world.
Because that complexity can just slow things down.
It does. A simple physiology score is fast, and it works.
Okay, so once we've spotted sepsis, the next step always used to be about lactate. The goal was always lactate clearance. Is that still true?
No, absolutely not. This might be one of the biggest reversals in practice.
Really?
Yeah. Lactate clearance is now seen as, frankly, overrated. The new guidance is clear. You must stop chasing lactate numbers blindly.
So if we're not chasing lactate, what are we chasing?
We're chasing clinical signs. We're looking at the patient.
And the big evidence for that is the Andromeda shock trial.
That's the one. It was a huge deal. It showed that targeting capillary refill time, or CRT, performed better than lactate-guided resuscitation.
And it was actually linked to lower mortality.
Yes, lower mortality. It's a fundamental switch from a lab value that takes time back to a fast physical exam finding you can get right at the bedside.
You can see the patient's perfusion status right then and there.
Instantly. It's often more informative than a number that shows up 30 minutes later.
But we've all been trained to watch lactate trends. So what do we do with that number now? If it's not a resuscitation target, what is it?
You have to see it as a signal, not a steering wheel.
A signal.
The American College of Emergency Physicians is very firm on this. They explicitly recommend against using lactate trends to guide IV fluid administration.
And the reason for that is so important. Lactate isn't just about poor perfusion.
Not at all. It's influenced by so many other things. Think about catecholamine surges. The patient is in pain, they're agitated. That adrenaline rush alone can drive up lactate.
Right, or liver dysfunction, seizures.
Exactly. All of these can generate lactate without any issue in tissue blood flow. So it's a sign of systemic distress, yes, but it's not a pure target for fluids.
Which brings us right back to the physical exam and capillary refill time being a better guide.
Precisely.
Okay, this whole conversation about lactate and perfusion leads us straight to fluids. For years, there was one magic number we all aim for. What's the status of that 30 milliliters per kilogram fluid rule?
It's seen a major downgrade. It is no longer a mandate.
So what is it now?
The Surviving Sepsis campaign now labels it as just a weak recommendation.
That's a huge change in language.
It has massive implications, and we have the evidence now, mostly from the Clovers trial.
Which compared restrictive versus liberal fluid strategies.
It did, and the main finding was that both strategies performed about the same when it came to patient outcomes.
So the takeaway for everyone listening is 30 milliliters per kilogram is a reasonable place to start, especially if the patient is hypotensive.
A starting point, exactly. But it should never be treated as a required final volume that every single patient has to receive. It's all about avoiding fluid overload.
And if we're pulling back on all that fluid up front, the next step becomes, well, more urgent.
It does. It forces the question, if we're using less fluid, when do we start vasopressors?
And the answer seems to be much earlier than we used to think.
Right.
Early vasopressors are now mainstream.
Oh, completely. It's not controversial anymore. Studies like Sensor and Clovers really support using early Norepinephrine.
The logic makes sense.
It's simple, right? You intervene sooner with a pressor, you stabilize their pressure faster, you shorten the time they're hypotensive, and you do it all with less risk of that harmful edema from too much fluid.
This is really the core of that smarter, not heavier idea.
That's it, exactly.
Now, while we're getting more precise with hemodynamics, there's one area where the message is still just about pure, simple speed.
Antibiotics.
Absolutely. What is the actual cost of delaying antibiotics in severe sepsis?
The numbers here are what should be driving policy in every hospital. Delays are even more catastrophically harmful than we thought.
So what does the data show?
Each hour of delay in getting the right broad-spectrum antibiotics into a patient with severe sepsis increases their in-hospital mortality by up to 7.6%.
7.6% per hour?
And it gets worse. Another study showed that every single hour of delay increases one-year mortality by 10%.
Wow. The message could not be clearer. You have to be fast.
You have to be incredibly fast.
So with that absolute need for speed, how can we possibly practice good antibiotic stewardship right at the start?
The key is using rapid diagnostic data to tailor the antibiotics you've already started.
You mean de-escalating quickly?
Right. And the best example is the MRSA nasal swab. If that swab comes back negative, which can happen very quickly now,
You can make a change.
you can immediately de-escalate. You can often stop the vancomycin. That's a huge win for protecting the patient's kidneys from potential toxicity. It's a huge win for stewardship. You treat fast, then you de-escalate smart.
Okay, let's pivot to adjunct therapies. The things we do beyond antibiotics and resuscitation. Steroids have always been a hot topic. When are they actually effective in sepsis?
The evidence is pretty clear on this now. They help, but only in a very specific situation.
Which is?
Established refractory shock.
So not as a preventative measure.
Definitely not. The HYPER trial showed that giving hydrocortisone early, before a patient is in true shock, does not prevent shock from developing.
So you wait.
You wait. The real hemodynamic benefit is only seen once shock is already established and vasopressors aren't getting the job done alone.
So no benefit pre-shock.
Right.
Real benefit when they're truly refractory. That's a critical distinction.
It is.
Okay, but maybe the most striking update of all involves a therapy that had a ton of hype. High-dose intravenous vitamin C. Is it recommended today?
The answer is a definitive, absolute no.
A complete reversal.
A complete reversal. It's now formally recommended against in the guidelines. The hype is over because the data came in and it was not good.
A large randomized controlled trial showed it didn't just not work.
It showed higher mortality. Patients requiring vasopressors who got IV vitamin C had a higher mortality rate than those who didn't.
So this is a clear case of needing to abandon something when the evidence is robustly negative.
Without a doubt. Speaking of refractory shock, for the absolute sickest patients, where fluids, early pressors, and even steroids have failed, there are some new, very specialized strategies starting to emerge.
What new strategy is on the table for these patients?
We're now seeing venarterial extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or VA ECMO, entering the conversation.
As a potential rescue therapy.
Exactly. It can be life-saving, but, and this is a huge, but it's only for a very specific group of patients.
Who are they?
Those with sepsis-induced cardiomyopathy and refractory hypotension. Patients who need both heart and lung support.
And even then, it's still a weak recommendation, right?
A very weak recommendation. It demands incredibly careful patient selection, and you need to be at a specialized center that has the resources. It is not a broad intervention.
So if we pull back and look at all these updates together, what's the main theme for sepsis care in 2025?
The message is just unmistakable. Resuscitation is getting smarter. It's getting more precise, less rigid. It is not about being heavier or more aggressive.
It's about precision tools like capillary refill time, earlier vasopressors.
And moving away from those unproven adjuncts and rigid fluid rules, it's about patient-specific decisions.
And you have to hold that key tension in your head.
Which is?
The need for incredible speed with antibiotics. That's 7.6% mortality increase per hour, balanced with the need for smart stewardship, using tools like the MRSA swab to de-escalate just as quickly.
So let's just quickly review the big shifts.
Let's do it.
Less blind fluid loading, less chasing of lactate goals.
A new reliance on clinical perfusion like CRT.
Earlier use of vasopressors.
And the firm abandonment of high-profile but ineffective adjuncts like intravenous vitamin C.
The rules are genuinely shifting beneath our feet. And it means we all have to update those old habits, and fast, to match the new evidence.
It's about being fast, but also smarter and more precise with every single move.